I would like to welcome you all and for tuning in to this session for continuing professional development, real estate mathematics. The main aim of this session is to close the gap within the real estate market and industry and try to check what are the requirements that we need to fulfill as real estate agents in the emerging housing market in this ever-changing world in terms of demand for housing as well as supply. For this session of real estate mathematics, we are likely to focus on the following learning outcomes. We'll look at the time value of money. Furthermore, we'll look into different types of interest rates that you can actually use to save, or as you save money for acquiring a house. We also need to look at the projections. And at the end, I'll give you also a conclusion pertaining to this session. As part of the introduction to this session, as real estate agents, we normally work across different property practitioners or stakeholders that have got main concerns and interest in the real estate industry. As we make conversations with these property practitioners or stakeholders in the real estate industry, we need to talk of numbers relating the real estate market industry. So it is of utmost significance to focus much on the real estate mathematics because it provides us with the link for logical thinking and rational decision making pertaining the real estate market industry. And with this in mind, we focus on interest rates, time value of money, loan to value, amortization, prorations, and debt to equity income. Virtually every transaction that we made in real estate focuses on the numbers, computations, and calculations. But these are bases for making decisions in the practical real estate industry. So we need to understand the dynamics. What are the new calculations that are coming up with the emerging market in the real estate industry as far as property management is concerned? In this presentation, I will focus on the theoretical element of financial estate mathematics, models, as well as financial formulas, and try to showcase where we can actually apply in real life situations in the real estate market and try to benefit and make decisions as well as predictions. Now, let's look at the time value of money. In simpler terms, when we are looking at the time value of money, we are simply saying the rand value of yesterday is not the same as the rand value of today because of changes in real interest rates, changes in exchange rates, changes in inflation rates, as well as dynamics in other economic factors that affect the value of money. Let's take, for example, the property that was acquired in 2008, let's say at a value of 100,000 rands, is not worth the same in 2018. Why? Because of the dynamics within the time value of money. During the course of the period from 2008 to 2018, the value of that same house that we acquired at 100,000, now it's really going for about between 300 to 400,000 rands. And we need to take into note to those changes. And therefore, it is very important to understand the applications of the mathematics of the time value of money in this respect in the real estate market. Furthermore, we need to understand that when you borrow a mortgage loan, you borrow at a principal value. But we also need to take into account the different types of interest rates that you can actually go for in terms of the loan that you apply for. Now, let's look at this, the mathematical application. If we borrow the mortgage loan today, that amount is known as principal. Then, when you repay, you pay plus interest. The interest can either be a simple rate interest rate or a compound rate interest rate. And that amount is known as accumulated value. The total amount repaid to the financial provider today is accumulated value. If we less the principal that you actually borrowed, the difference is the amount of interest rates that you are likely to pay. But how best as property practitioners can we benefit from these different types of interest rates? Let's say you want to make an investment, a housing investment today. What form of interest rates do you think you can actually invest your money in so that you can actually buy a specific property, let's say after 5 years? And why do you opt for that type of interest rate? So as we go further with this discussion, we'll look at the simple interest rate, its application, the difference between simple interest rates, as well as the compound interest rate. So it's very important for us to note that and understand the application of this mathematics in the real estate industry. Now let's look at the simple interest rate, the mathematical part of it, as it is applied to the real estate industry. The simple interest rate is a distinct feature of simple interest rate is that this type of interest rates, once credited to an account, does not itself any further interest. If you borrow mortgage loan at 10% today, let's say 10% of 100,000 rands is 10,000. You are likely to pay an interest of 10,000 rands on an annual basis until you pay out the loan. That's what we refer to as simple interest rate. So you can check at the mathematical application there. However, we have got another type of interest rate, which is known as the compound interest rate. This is a compound interest rate. In simpler terms, the compound interest rates earn interest on interest. As interest accumulates, there is also more interest charged on that interest. So at the end of the day, when you borrow at compound interest rate, you are likely to pay more than borrowing at simple interest rates. So it is important for our clientele base in terms of home seekers to understand the benefits that they derive from these different types of interest rates in whatever decision that pertain to themselves when they seek for properties to buy. But however, if you wanted to invest today, it will be good for our clientele to invest at compound interest rate because you are likely to earn more as compared to simple interest rate. So we have got two scenarios here. If you want to borrow a loan, better you borrow at simple interest rate terms and not at compound interest terms, then if you want to invest in an account, better you invest at compound interest rate and not at simple interest rates. By so doing, you are likely to earn more and meet your target as per the given period of investment, and eventually you will be able to acquire your property. So these simple interest rates, we need to understand them very well, and we need to know where we apply them so well. As I already alluded to, you can look at the graphical distinction between the simple interest rate and the compound interest rate. But however, the main difference is that if we borrow money today, one home seeker at simple interest rate and the other home seeker at compound interest rate, the one who have borrowed at compound interest rate is likely to pay more in terms of repayment as compared to the one who borrowed at simple interest rate. So that's the major difference. Compound interest rates earn interest on interest, and simple interest rates does not earn interest. It actually earn a uniform amount of interest on annual basis. So it is very important for us to take note of that, so as to make more informed decisions when we make decisions pertaining borrowing loans or pertaining investment for the acquisition of properties and land. We have got a very simple illustrative example where we are saying an investor puts 5,000 into a savings account for the next 6 years so that he may be able to buy a flat at a new estate in Midrand. How much would he have saved if he were exposed to the following interest rate conditions? At simple interest rate, 10%. At compound interest rate, 10%. So in order for us to understand the applicability of these two types of interest rates within the real estate industry, we need to understand the differences first between simple interest rate and the compound interest rate. As you can see from that calculation, the first calculation is for simple interest rate. After that period, you are likely to attract an interest rate of 8,000. But using the compound interest rate, you are likely to attract an interest rate of 8,858. But please take note, this is an investment that you want to make. So which type of interest rates are you likely to invest on regarding the resultant of these calculations? And therefore, I would say it would be good if you want to invest money for acquisition of land and property, invest in an account that earns at compound interest rates than at simple interest rate, because you are likely to achieve your target as earlier as possible. The compound interest rate is greater than the simple interest rate amount due to the interest earning interest. So it is very important for our clientele, for all property practitioners, to understand this applicability of different types of interest rates, pertaining different decisions in terms of property investment. One decision is either you want to buy, or another decision you want to go and borrow a loan, or you want to make an investment. So the dynamics within these different types of interest rates also need to be taken note of. Furthermore, let's also look at the present value. Assume that a home seeker wants to acquire a property at 10,000 in the next 5 years. What is the value of 10,000 rands as of today? By so doing, we are actually determining the present value. what is the value that I can actually invest today, such that after 5 years, it will actually accumulate to 10,000, and I will be able to meet my goal and acquire the property at 10,000, my set target. That's what we refer to as present value. So present value, it's very important for us to note so that we can make an informed decision and invest wisely in terms of acquisition of properties and land. And furthermore, due to dynamics and the changes in the economic factors, such as interest rates, exchange rates, inflation, they do affect the time value of money. So we need to know and understand how best can we be able to overcome and eradicate the impact of changes in interest rates, inflation rate, and exchange rate in our property investment. This is very important for the real estate market. We can also look at the formula for calculation of present value. But what is of importance is for you to understand, when we're talking of present value, what is the value of 10,000 today that we need to use in the next 5 years to come. So this is the application of real estate mathematics. Then we've got an example, an illustrative example. Let's look into that and see how best can we benefit in using the present value as element of real estate mathematics in the real estate industry. An investor must take a payment of 5,000 in 5 years' time as a deposit for a house. The investor wishes to make provisions for this payment by investing a single sum now in a deposit account that pays 10% per annum compound interest rate. So what is the value of this 5,000 that we wanted to have in 5 years today at 10% compound interest rate? It is very important for us to take note of that. If we do that calculation, we are likely to get a present value of 3,104 rands.61. So if we take 3,104.61 and put into a housing savings scheme today at 10% compound interest rate, it will actually enable us to achieve our target of acquiring a property that worth 5,000 after 5 years. So it's very important to take note the significance of the application of these different types of interest rates in the real estate market. So let's take note, for example, someone who have never acquired a house, but has come to seek advice from a property practitioner within the banking system. The property practitioner within the banking system or the mortgage officer needs to give an informed decision to the client so that the client knows very well which form of investment can he or she take in order to achieve his or her goal after a certain given period, and which will make him or her eventually acquire the property that she targets. And therefore, these are some of the schemes that actually the property practitioner within the banking environment can actually advise you to make an investment today in an account that earns compound interest rate. so that after a certain period of time, you will be able to achieve your target of acquiring the house. And furthermore, in terms of real estate mathematics again, we also need to look at the future values. When we're looking at the future values, let's take, for example, we have got 5,000 today. What is the worth of 5,000 amount of property in the next 10 years? We need to understand these dynamics. Like, for example, we are saying we acquire a building in 2010 at 200,000 rands. But because of changes in interest rates, economic factors, inflation rates, market conditions in terms of supply and demand of the properties in South Africa, the value of that property has since appreciated to something like 500,000 rands. So if you make that investment today of 200,000, you are likely to assume that after a 5-year period, I'm likely to go and dispose this investment at a more value of 500,000. That's what we refer to as future value. You are investing today for the purpose of using that investment or disposing that investment at a future date. So these are some of the computations and the calculations that the property practitioners within the real estate industry need to understand and apply them to real life situation. But take note, as we apply these mathematics, they should also be within the regulated framework of South Africa. We don't need to prejudice home seekers by actually maybe aiming at making profit, but all the same making the home seekers suffer at the end of the day. So let's try by all means to make sure that we use these calculations wisely. Now, let's look at the element of loan to value ratio. In simpler terms, when we're talking of loan to value ratio, we are simply comparing the value of the loan that you want to acquire from a commercial bank for the purpose of acquiring a property that you desire and the real value of the property in the marketplace. What is the worthiness of the property that you want to acquire in the market? And how much loan do you want to acquire from a bank to meet that target? So it is of utmost significance to note that loan to ratio value also determines the amount of repayments that you make to the bank. The higher the loan to value ratio, the higher the repayment that you are likely to be paying to the bank in terms of the loan that you acquire. But if the loan to value ratio is lower, then it's likely to attract also a lower value in terms of loan repayments, installments. So this information needs to be well articulated within the real estate market so that our target market, our clientele, understand the application of these mathematics and be able to benefit from these calculations and make an informed decision. Furthermore, let's look at amortized loans. An amortizing loan is a loan where the principal of the loan is paid down over the life of the loan. That is amortized according to the amortization schedule, typically through equal payments. The benefits of amortized loans is that once you come up with an amortized table or a schedule, it enables you as a home seeker to know the amount of repayment that you are likely to pay until you pay up the loan that you have actually acquired. And therefore, it is significant in terms of making your own calculations and decisions pertaining to this. So in terms of new homeowners or young South Africans that wants to acquire housing, it is very important to understand the application of the amortization loan schedule and how do we benefit from the amortization loan schedule. Let's look at the effects due to amortization of debt. One, we look at the credit. Bulk of the credit risk in the repayment of the principal at maturity, at which point the debt must either be paid off in full or rolled over. By paying off the principal over time, this is a risk mitigated. Then the other effect is in terms of interest rates. Amortization reduces the duration of the debt. It also reduces the debt sensitivity to interest rate risk as compared to debt which is the same maturity and coupon rate. So these are some of effects that we need to understand in terms of the applicability of the real estate mathematics in this regard, looking at the amortization loan schedule. We have got the formula for coming up with monthly payments in terms of the amortization formula. We are saying monthly payment equals to loan amount times interest rates divided by payments per year, where R stands for interest rate, any payments per year, T number of years. But however, due to improvements in technology, this can actually be done using softwares, computer-generated softwares to come up with the amortization table. You can also use calculators to do these calculations. But what's of significance is for us to understand the effects of the amortization loan schedule and how best can we benefit. We have got a schedule, an example of an amortization table there, where we have got month 1 up to 10 on the first column, outstanding month. Then we've got interest rates, advance up to balance. But I want to focus on the repayments. If we check at the repayments column there, the repayments column, the effect of amortizing loan is that we are likely to pay a uniform repayment until we finish up the loan. So this will actually help the home seeker or the clientele in terms of making plans on how to service the loans that have the home loans that they've acquired from banks or financial institutions to meet their purpose. Furthermore, let's look at another very important and critical calculation, debt to income ratio. If you want to acquire a mortgage loan, it is very important for financial institutions and banks to calculate your debt to income ratio. We need to ascertain and see how much are you owing overall to other credit providers. It will be very risky for the providers of loans to issue a loan to a client or a home seeker that have got a high debt to income ratio. This will be a risk as the client might fail to pay as he is trying to honor other obligations that they have already acquired. But however, for clients that have got lower debt to income ratio, these are likely to get their mortgage loans because they've got less debt to service. So as real estate agents or as property practitioners, we need to inform our clientele to understand that in order for them to qualify for different schemes that are available for them to acquire properties in areas such as Tembisa, in areas such as Sendon, they need to have a lower debt-to-income ratio. It's very important for them to understand this. Furthermore, let's also look at prorations. When we're looking at prorations, it's one of the most significant section that the real estate industry needs to understand. And where do we apply the prorations? Regarding that, we are trying to close the gap within the emerging home market in South Africa. One of the most common calculations used by real estate agents is prorations. Many purchase contracts used in real estate contains provisions of prorations between sellers and buyers. There are some instances where the buyers and sellers need to share certain costs when acquiring properties. Costs such as taxes, property taxes, costs such as fees that we pay maybe to homeowners associations. So it's very important for us to make sure that we understand the application of prorations to real life situations within the real estate market. In most cases, but not all, buyers are charged for prorations. Charges show up as a debt on the buyer's closing statement and as a credit on seller's closing statement. The credits increase the seller's net profits and reimburse the seller for items the seller is prepaid for the time period. The seller will not own the property. So it is also very significant for us to note this. Now let's look at the illustrative calculation example in terms of prorations. If the monthly rent price is 100 Rand through the following calculation, 30 days per month, how much are you likely to pay per day in a 30-day monthly calendar? So we have to do those calculations. After doing those calculations, we realize that per day you're likely to pay 3 Rand 0.33 per day. But however, what if you have dwelled for 10 days? Then we need to do further calculations and say, for 10 days, how much are you supposed to pay? If you are paying 3 Rand 0.33 per day for 10 days, then you do the calculations, you do the multiplication, and you come up with the production payment that you are likely to pay for 10 days. So these mathematics are very important as far as real estate decisions are concerned, so that home seekers can make informed decisions and understand how they are likely to benefit from this application of real estate mathematics. Right? In terms of reflection, so far in this session, we have managed to cover the applicability of different types of interest rates. If one wants to save to acquire a property, or if one wants to go and borrow loan from the financial institution and banks. We also explored the concept of the time value of money by calculating future and present values of an asset. As we have already alluded that the time value of money implies that the Rand of today does not worth as the same as the Rand of tomorrow. If we acquire property today at 100,000 rands, we are not likely to assume that after 10 years, that property will still worth 100,000 rands, but it's likely to worth more. Depends with the market dynamics, the demand and supply in the housing industry. And furthermore, we also looked at the application of loan-to-value ratio, as well as debt-to-income ratio. We also look at the application and benefits that are likely to deduce from the amortization schedule. Finally, we also looked at the prorations. So it's very important to understand how we apply these real estate mathematics in the emerging and ever-changing housing market. For further research and reading, you could also look at the online tools. One, you can also check on the bond market. There are websites that are given there to do a further research and understand how much can you benefit from this real estate mathematics. So at this juncture, I would like to say it is very important for us to understand the application of real estate mathematics, as these are the basis for decision making within the real estate industry. On a daily basis, in order for us to come up with prices of properties, in order for us to make predictions, in order for us to make calculations of profits that we are likely to earn as we invest properties, we need to apply real estate mathematics. So these are the basis for decision making and rational decision making in the real estate industry. That brings me to the conclusion of the presentation. Please remember to answer the 10 multiple choice questions to obtain 5 verifiable CBT points for this session.